are tonight. And so without further ado, let's get them up on the main screen. And Stephanie and Dany, will you introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about who you are? And then off we go. So folks out there, please stay muted if you can. And if you have a question, put it in chat or do the reaction button down in the lower bottom screen. You can raise your hand and we'll try to call on you as we go along. And here we go.
Hey everyone, like Mark said, my name's Stephanie Blumenthal. I work for the Illinois Environmental Council as their climate policy manager. And I'm just going to share slides, Dany, while you introduce yourself.
Stephanie, good evening, everyone. It's really great to be here with everyone with NWSOFA-Indivisible. Had a pleasure of working with many Indivisible members over the years in several different capacities. I was telling Bill and Mark that y'all were very instrumental in a lot of the races I was working on in 2020. So really thankful to be here. I am now Illinois Environmental Council's Legislative Relations Director and work very closely with Stephanie on a lot of our clean and eco transportation issues, which we're really happy to be talking to you all today. So I'll pass it back to Stephanie to talk a little bit about what you can expect tonight.
So like Dany mentioned, we work together on transportation on behalf of IEC. And so tonight we're going to be talking about another coalition we're a part of, which is the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. We're going to hit on what our three-pronged platform is, and we're going to be highlighting highlighting our work on clean and equitable transportation. This is a little bit of an agenda slide just so that you know what to expect. This actually is an interactive presentation, so we're going to be pausing twice throughout this presentation to both discuss a few things with you all, and we're hoping that we can get some feedback from you in the form of a survey, which we'll introduce in a little bit.
And I will do a little bit of introduction of who IEC is. We are a member-based organization. Since 1975, we've been working to protect and safeguard Illinois, which includes its people, its plants, its animals, and the natural systems on which we all depend by building power for people and the environment. So we represent over 150 environmental organizations across Illinois, including everything from your big greens like your Sierra Clubs, Natural Resources Defense Councils, and Earth Justice to more local organizations. And we work together to advance equitable public policies that creates healthy environments for Illinois. And we do that a lot through making sure that we're collaborating with the experts, communicating that to constituents, and building up advocacy and power for long-term building on these policies. Our environmental portfolio, we cover 6 issue areas. Early on in IEC's history, we were very much focused on sustainable agriculture and conservation work, but over the last few years, we've expanded to be more broad. Clean water and zero waste has been another core part of what IEC has been about for a very long time of our history. And more recently, in the last 10 years, we've included clean energy and eco transportation to those pieces, just knowing that we are in a climate crisis and our energy sector and transportation sector have a lot to do with the climate crisis we're in. So we are working to make sure Illinois is not only a nation leader, but also a world leader in bringing in clean, equitable transportation and energy policies. And like I mentioned at the top, a lot of that is on our approach of coalition building, doing the education to legislators, and then developing levers to be advocates for these policies by bringing this information to community members and organizations that can help us advance these pieces. So it's one of the reasons we're out here tonight, to make sure that we are talking a bit about the policies we're proposing. So I'll talk just a little bit about the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. The ICJC is a group of environmental and justice faith-based institutions. It expands through a lot of different groups, including student activists, clean technology businesses, and entrepreneurs, to put together our energies, our expertise, our ability to network and bring our organizations to the table to make sure that we are fighting for a clean and equal future for Illinois. And thanks in part to Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, we put Illinois on the map with the introduction of the Climate Equitable Jobs Act. And currently we're starting to develop our next set of policy platforms to get us to where we need to be. And I'll pass it over to Stephanie to talk a little bit about what those policy platforms look like.
Awesome. Thanks, Dany. So with that background, this is what we're going to be chatting a little bit about tonight. So as I mentioned at the beginning, ICJC, or the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, has kind of a three-pronged approach at the moment. So our first one is about the Clean and Reliable Grid Act. So our goal is to achieve 100% clean and renewable energy, or excuse me, power, and then fossil fuel free, that is a tongue twister, powered grid by 2035. Next, we have the Clean and Healthy Buildings Act, which is all about decarbonizing our building stock and ensuring that we have what we need to transition away from fossil fuel use and into 100% clean buildings by 2050. And then our last piece, last but certainly not least, because it's the one we're going to be chatting about tonight, is the Clean and Equitable Transportation Act. So we are hoping, through this act to achieve a zero emissions transportation sector by largely, expanding access to public transit and zero emission forms of transportation. So this is the one that we are going to be focusing on tonight. And then a little bit of background. So we often call these sessions listen, lead, share events. And the reason why we do that, this model was originally developed during the creation of the Clean and Equitable Jobs Act that Dany mentioned. We use clean and equitable a lot, a little bit of a tongue twister. But we created this model because we wanted to make sure that we were listening to the needs of communities all across Illinois, that we were able to be in conversation and share insight about possible policy solutions to problems we're all facing, and then come together to ensure that we can build a clean system. And tonight we're specifically talking about a clean and equitable transportation system for everyone all across Illinois, regardless of where you live. So that is why we call them listen, lead, shares. Like I mentioned, tonight we're talking about the Clean and Equitable Transportation Act. Hopefully by the end of this, y'all will have a little bit of a better idea on what we're hoping to achieve with this piece of legislation. So to start off, a little bit of a level set. I think oftentimes when we all think about pollution or air pollution and what that might look like, we think of this. We think of something like a coal plant that has a smokestack that's emitting huge fumes, something really maybe obvious and an eyesore that makes us think of, what we think pollution is. And that's kind of where we've set our sights in terms of things to get rid of. However, the truth is that pollution also looks like this. It also looks like crowded highways. And just to highlight this pie chart here shows you that actually in Illinois, transportation is actually the highest single sector for CO2 emissions. So 33% of our overall CO2 emissions come from the transportation sector. So on the one hand, this might be jarring, it might be unexpected, since like I said, it doesn't maybe look like what we're used to thinking about pollution looking like. But on the other hand, I think it's really good. The way I think about it is it's really good to know, because we have some solutions to this problem. We can think of ways, and we have thought of ways to end the use of things that cause this type of pollution in our transportation sector. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And something else to consider when we're thinking about clean and equitable transportation, we're thinking past just the use of cars. We're thinking about, can people walk safely in my community? Do they want to walk in my community? Are there trees? Are there sidewalks? Can you bike in our community? Is that a safe thing to do? And oftentimes, in areas where there aren't sidewalks, where there aren't bike paths, that means that you're going to have to be more reliant on other forms of transportation, which often includes, forms of transportation that emit pollution and, just aren't as accessible for folks. Even if, say you wanted to walk, maybe that's not accessible to you because it's not safe without sidewalks. And I think it's really important, we're going to talk about this in a little bit, to think about where are there sidewalks and where aren't there. And I think sometimes the unfortunate truth that we know is that this is not equitably distributed in places where folks, have access to walking paths and where they don't. And I think it's really important as we think about how to craft this piece of legislation to consider that we need to ensure all communities have access to these, not just some. So a big portion of what I've been focusing on since I joined IEC pretty recently in May. And since that time, I have been working with Dany on specifically thinking a lot about our public transportation system. So in the Chicago area, we are going to be facing a very large funding gap by 2026. So a lot of our, the RTA region is how I think of it. So CTA, Metro, and PACE have been kind of propped up through federal COVID funds because of the deficit in riders during the pandemic. With that, those COVID funds are coming to an end, and those agencies are facing a $700 million gap, and that is an annual funding. That's not a one-time thing. So something, as we consider this obviously huge gap in funding, which is going to need to be replenished. We're also thinking about other things in the transportation system. So this graph here shows you that the Chicago region receives an extremely small amount of state transit operating funds compared to other large cities in the US. So looking at places like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, they get over 25% of their funding from the state, and Chicago only gets 17%. So that's something that we're thinking about. We're also thinking about how in the RTA region, we see less service than we did 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And unfortunately, unreliable service and some safety concerns have also led to some ridership declines. All of this leads to worse road traffic because people feel that they must use cars or they feel like it's not safe to do otherwise, or that transit isn't accessible to them. So we are hoping to change all of this, and especially thinking about this gap in funding as an opportunity to think differently about our transportation system and how we can operate in a way that ensures both better transit and that more folks are excited and able to access transit. As I mentioned before, access to transportation is not equitable. So 1 in 4 adults in the US actually experience transportation insecurity. And that overlaps with many other issues that we see. If you think about if you can't get to your job, then maybe you can't support yourself or your family. That's obviously a problem. And in Chicago, as we can see, or as we think about, those areas that might experience this, that's compounding issues, and that's really inequitable. And we also think about the health impacts of using more transportation. So this map is of air quality. And we can see that there are areas of Chicago, and this is city specific, experience way worse air quality. And bad air quality impacts your health, it impacts your children, it impacts your ability to do things like go outside and have fun safely, which is really important for mental health. All things to think about when we think about how important it is to uplift this issue of transportation in the Chicagoland area. We're going to do a little bit of reflection, and we have a survey we're hoping y'all can help us with. And I'm going to pass it back over to Dany to do this section of our presentation.
Definitely, thanks, Stephanie. So, like we mentioned at the top, with these Listen Lead shares, we don't just want to talk at people about the issues, the problems. We want to hear how you all are experiencing those issues within your own community. I know, the Northwest part of the Chicagoland area, faces its own set of issues with transportation and transit. And, as we are developing these policies and advocating for them, we want to make sure we're bringing your experiences to our legislators to make sure that they understand what the lived experience is across their district and across the state, so we can make sure that we are developing policies that make sense for the state and not just policies that we've come up. So if y'all have a phone available, feel free to scan the QR code right up here. And if not, I also dropped in the little link that can take you to our Google Form survey. You can feel free to click that and open up the survey. So the first part of the survey, we just want to hear, where in Illinois do you live? And I know some of you might not be here in Illinois. It seems like there's people who join these calls who come from other parts of the country. That's totally okay. You could put do not live in Illinois, but I think what we're looking for here is either your neighborhood or your suburb. Where do you live in Illinois, so we can kind of gather the information. We've been running these Listen Lead shares across the state. So the more information we have, the better we can put that information. Second question we have is, how do you usually get around your community? And for this, we would like you to choose your top three. And your community could be your own neighborhood, or how do you usually get around for your main appointments, whether that's going to work, going to the grocery store, for your healthcare needs, whatever it might be. We're really looking to gather information of how do people move around the different parts of the state. There are places where you can use public transit very freely and get to places within 10 minutes, and other places where that's not available. And you have to either drive your personal vehicle or use a shared ride app or taxi. Looking to gather that information. Third question that we have is, how satisfied do you feel with the quality of your transportation choices? So we're ranking this on three different systems. Efficiency, meaning you feel confident that you will get to a place with your transportation choices in a timely manner, and that could be consistent across the board. Accessibility, that you're able to access your top three favorite or top three transportation choices in a way that's very satisfactory, that you can depend on it, that you don't have to wait long. And then the safety components are the other pieces that we're really looking to develop out. How safe do you feel using your individual transportation choices? Before we move on to these three questions, we'd love to see if anyone on this call wants to volunteer to talk a little about their transportation experience. Like, what do you usually use to get around your community? And feel free to come off mute or drop in a chat.
I could answer that.
Hi, Jerry.
Okay. I use a bicycle for a lot of my transportation locally. I mean, it's easy to do, especially if you have an electric assist bike.
Mm-hmm.
Electric assist bikes help older people like myself, and they really work splendidly for getting you there quickly. That's it. Thank you.
Jerry, if I can talk to you a little bit, how safe do you feel your neighborhood or your community is for bike safety?
The safety a lot depends on yourself and your commitment to using the rules of the road. And I use a rear view mirror that's mounted real close to my eyeball on the left side, and it sees behind very well. And just a quick glance will tell me what's going on back there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else feel encouraged to answer this question?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Michael, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. So I use a hybrid vehicle. I get about 36 miles per gallon. I really wouldn't consider riding in my community. There's really no bike access lanes. I have a lived experience in Holland. Now, first, I want to say that Europe is far better regarding public transportation than the United States is. It's been that way for decades now. And I mean, America is like just way, way, way behind regarding efficient public transportation. But in Holland, they have dedicated bike lanes, they have dedicated walking lanes, and they have dedicated car lanes all across every city in Holland, whether you're in Groningen, Amsterdam, pick a city, it's far superior than here in America. The other thing I would say is that if you're going to go ahead and study a city, I would study Vienna, Austria. It has the best public transportation in the world, in my opinion. I've been there. You can use every single piece of public transportation in a seamless way. I think it can cost you maybe, I don't know, several $100s for a whole year to have complete access to the public transportation indefinitely, like for the whole year. It's amazing. And I would just say that in the city of Peoria, we have people that are horrifically disadvantaged regarding their access to public transportation. It affects how they get their groceries, how they get their medications, how they can work. It's just completely crippling. And if we could completely change the public transportation in this country, it would be an amazing boom regarding the efficiency and productivity of every single citizen in this nation. That's what I'll say.
Michael, thank you so much for sharing that. And if you don't mind sharing that in the survey as well, I think are there barriers to using certain transportation options in your community? And so what are they? That long answer is really what we need for the conversations we have with legislators, because we're hearing that across the board, right? That people are not satisfied with transportation. We are, as a country, we're too car dependent, and we don't have the currently we don't have the infrastructure. And I think that's where we're trying to move the state of Illinois, is making sure that as we are planning out the next 30 to 50 years of transportation policies, that we are analyzing how movement is available. How do we make it safer and more accessible by building out more protected bike lanes, more cities that are, instead of expanding suburbs, making sure that we're densifying them to make it easier for people to move around, and then also investing in our public transit infrastructure to meet the demands that people need, and especially knowing that we have an aging population in the state of Illinois, and cars aren't always going to be there as a number one source of movement. We want to make sure that we are providing the additional sources. So it is going to be a big piece of it. Cordelia, I see you with your hand raised. Would love to hear.
Hi, my name's Cordelia. I live in DeKalb, which is about 60 miles west of Chicago. And we have a bus system, and we also have Northern Illinois University has a bus system that I think are available. I must confess, I don't really use it. Those that I know that use it say that NIU has an app that you can tell where the bus is, which I think is great. I don't know if the city bus system has that. I don't find it to be that user friendly. I visited Denver back just before the Democratic Convention had their thing in 2000. I want to say 2008, and I found it to be really helpful to get to the downtown, but we don't have anything like that. So I mainly drive a hybrid vehicle to get around. I try to keep my driving to a minimum, but that's how I get around.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Cordelia. And I think that is similar experiences we continue hearing. So if folks can continue answering the questions on the survey, we would love to continue building the knowledge of experience. So some of the following questions will include: how much freedom do you feel in choosing public transit as a method to get around your community? Some of us who live down in the city, I could choose between 3 different bus lines or to get me to any which way direction I need to go. Other of us, I keep hearing that, we might be limited to only one option. And some of us, we might not even be sure if there's any public transit within community that helps us move around. I think the follow-up question is, does the number feel sufficient? And I think from what I'm hearing from Cordelia and Michael is that it's not right now. And I think that is like a big piece of the puzzle that we want to make sure that we are iterating to our elected officials down in Springfield, that we need to invest in public transit. We need to invest in transportation overall. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what our ideas look like. But we really would appreciate, continuing to hear from you all and getting information on the survey so we can ensure that we are bringing this information to legislators. So I'm going to pause here. I want to thank everyone who's volunteered their experiences, and I'm going to pass it back to Stephanie so we can talk a little bit about the solutions that we have ahead for y'all.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thanks again for everybody who shared. And something to consider also while we're going through this is that, as mentioned at the beginning, the good part about these Listen, Lead, Share events is that we can also share some solutions that we have. So we're going to go there now as well. So what we at the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition have devised is kind of a 3-part piece of legislation or package of laws that we think would ensure Illinois' commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, as well as increase mobility options for people living in the entire state. So what that looks like, as I said, there's kind of 3 parts. One is looking at how we clean up cars and trucks, so car and truck emissions. That's mostly thinking about zero emission vehicles. The one that I mentioned earlier and that we've kind of been chatting about here as well is robust transit. So thinking about the future and planning our public transportation all across the state. And then the last piece is thinking about how we ensure there are safe, active modes of transportation. So things that we talked about, like biking and walking, or using your e-bike, scooter, rollerblading, however it is you get around or want to get around, ensuring that that is an option and that it's a safe way to get around. And so we think that between these three pieces of legislation, we would ensure our commitment and to clean and equitable transportation, and to ensuring that Illinois meets its climate goals as well, which is an exciting combination. And I don't want to say I like this slide, but I think it does a really good job of illustrating how we can either turn this into an opportunity. So that the green version of this highway at the bottom, which shows kind of like what was mentioned in Holland, things that have dedicated bus lanes, dedicated bike lanes, places for walking, as well as for cars that are hopefully, cleaner and either, aren't burning fuel or are hybrid, things like that. Or, we can go to the bottleneck and just continually making our highways bigger, which really doesn't do very much to, fix our congestion issues or ensure that we're reducing pollution and keeping our air and our cities cleaner. So the other good news about this, I mentioned that we're part of the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. So we have a stake in ensuring that our state's transition to a cleaner future ensures better job growth as well. So we don't want to, do one without the other. So the great news is that within transportation infrastructure, transit and repair of roads and bridges does currently generate the largest number of jobs. And transit actually generates over 5,000 jobs, or 31% more jobs than the construction of roads and bridges per $1 billion spent. So basically, this means that investing in public transit is a better way to create jobs for everyday Illinoisans that are looking to work. We have an example here as well from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act that kind of, again, just reiterates that investing your money in public transit and in these public transit projects is a better use of our money. It goes farther, it employs more people, and ultimately it has a better impact on ensuring that everybody in our state has access to mobility options. The other thing that we want to do is we want to change the way that the Illinois Department of Transportation does their planning. Right now, DOT is really focused on roads and highways and thinking mainly about cars as our form of mobility. As a part of that kind of three-pronged approach, we're thinking about how a greenhouse gas policy for transportation would have positive impacts on our state. What would this do? What would a policy for reducing greenhouse gas emissions look like for the transportation sector? This kind of lays out our three ideas on how this would work. So mainly this would eliminate greenhouse gases in the transportation sector by prioritizing cleaner transportation options for funding, things like lower or zero emission vehicles. We would build a more racially equitable transportation system by increasing mobility options. So that equity piece of the Clean and Equitable Transportation Act that I highlighted earlier. And then again, this would create more job opportunities in mobility sectors, which is really exciting. And while creating more jobs, it would also provide more options for those without cars to actually access those jobs. So I kind of like to think of it as walking the walk and talking the talk. We're creating jobs and making sure people can actually get to those jobs and have access to both of those things, which is, I think, an exciting idea. And then this graphic kind of expands on this idea of changing the way that IDOT plans. So this is a graphic that shows the annual benefits of the plan that we've created. So of investing in public transit, of investing in safe and equitable modes of transportation, and of investing in electrifying our cars and trucks. Doing all of these things reduces greenhouse gas emissions, which we all know is a net positive. It improves air quality, which actually can save about 47 lives every year, which is really crazy to think that we're not already prioritizing this, if for no other reason than that one. Driving is really dangerous. And so by prioritizing alternative ways of moving throughout our state, we can avoid crashes and avoid fatalities. And by promoting safe and active modes of transportation, we can also promote healthier lifestyles, which is really exciting as well. And also, this would likely increase the amount of money folks can save when they don't have to invest in owning one or multiple vehicles, if that's an opportunity that they have to own a vehicle. And I mentioned at the beginning, the RTA region has a large funding gap to fill as COVID money dries up. And we are trying to look at this as an opportunity. We believe that in order to ensure that our region has a world-class transportation system, we would like to see our state invest 1.5 billion annually to create a system that we can all be proud of, that offers exceptional service, is universally accessible, including making a fully ADA accessible transit system and bolstering paratransit services. This can be a transportation system that is safe and comfortable. We want to have integrated and affordable fares. So one fare system across all three of our, well, what is now three different agencies. We want affordable passes for low income and youth riders. And lastly, we want to ensure that, desirable destinations remain within reach so that people can get to where they want to go using this transportation system. Yeah, Beth, what's up?
Okay, so here's my question. I used to have a disability card to go on one of the major train systems here because I would frequent doctors. And now, although I had the disability card, I didn't always sit in the disability section. Yeah, because I don't feel, if I don't need it, I'm not going to take advantage of it. But one thing that's been really bothering me, and I'm not sure, since I'm mainly only familiar with this one type of, this one train company, it says that this area is for people with disabilities, but it's not like reserved only for people with disabilities. And I don't know if after decades, maybe I'm a little sensitive to this, but I can understand, now it goes to the airport. So people who have a lot of luggage sit in the handicap section, and this maybe sounds a bit like, if you can travel, you can walk up or down to the seats. Okay, but I understand, at least if you're a parent and you have a carriage with your child, I'm a little more sensitive and aware of that. But I feel in general, like one time it was packed, and I know you're not really supposed to judge someone saying, oh, they look disabled or not, you know what I mean? But I think it's really, really wrong, for somebody to have to say, hey, do you mind moving because I'm handicapped? I feel that's kind of an invasion of my personal privacy. I've also learned how the disabled learn to accommodate the non-disabled versus working together. So when we're talking about something that's also ADA compliant for transportation, I just, I don't, since I'm relatively new to this, I don't know, like, who you speak to or whatever, but if that is something that you have connections for, can you please at least pass that along? Because I really do not think it's fair that there may be an area for 8 people, and like I said, I don't want to repeat, but I just feel it's really wrong for somebody who really needs it to say, because after a while they're going to say, and please don't excuse my language, but after a while you're going to hear some grumpy old man or some grumpy old woman saying, get the fuck out of here because this is for the handicap, and I tried fixing that a couple decades ago, but maybe I talked to the wrong person at the time. So anyway, I just wanted to a kind of an aspect regarding the ADA compliance for transportation.
Yeah, so my first thought is I very much so hope that you'll share what you just shared in our survey, because the data that we use, like Dany mentioned, goes we use it to, whenever we speak to lawmakers about why this stuff is important, we like to use stories. And your story is so important. So thank you for sharing. And I think something that is one of the reasons why we really want to make this a reality, right, is one thing to consider, right, is if there are more trains that come more often, they're going to be less crowded and those seats are going to be more available for the people who truly need them. So that's something, that I've thought about as well. And we really do want to make sure that this hopefully, new and improved transportation system in our area is designed for everyone. And when we say everyone, we mean able-bodied and less able-bodied folks. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I don't have a specific contact at the moment, but we are advocating for this to be part of our, bill package.
I don't even know where to begin. So I'm just here to, to listen, to learn, and if I have an experience that may be helpful, to help, because I'm concerned democracy, at least around here, isn't working as well as I would like. So, and I want, and for a while, I sounded like Trump, which is somebody I would not vote for. So I needed to be sure, and I needed to get more involved, because a lot of things around here that are just not okay. So anyway, thank you for listening. Sorry.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing your story. That's great. And like I said, hopefully you'll write that down for us to have whenever we talk to lawmakers as well. And folks can feel free to raise their hands or to put their questions in the chat as well. So this actually was a great segue. So extra thank you, Beth. So something that we are thinking about with this new funding structure that we'd like to see put in place is a different and better governance structure for the RTA region. So right now we have 3 separate agencies. We have Metra, PACE, and the Chicago Transit Authority. I will share, I moved to Chicago. Dany knows that I moved here 5 months ago for this job, which I was very excited about. And I largely chose where I lived based on how many forms of transportation I could offer, because I didn't want to be reliant on a car. And come to learn that you actually have to learn 3 completely different timetables. You can't even use the same card for all 3 of them. And their schedules do not align with each other often, which is really problematic and is not conducive to wanting to use public transportation as often as maybe you would if, you could count on a bus being there after you get off a train, or if you could count on your transfer being on time, or at the very least having an active way to, look at one map and understand what was going on with the system. So we believe that creating one overarching transit authority, we're hoping that this would streamline processes and ensure those things that I just mentioned, like timetables, like customer concerns. Let's say you have one concern for what is currently multiple agencies. Right now, you would have to go to 3 separate boards to voice your concern. And we just don't think that's very accessible to the average transit rider in this area. So, and lastly, also, we would hope that by coming together, this could foster innovation amongst transit professionals and people running our overarching transit agency. With that, hopefully that was some food for thought. I'll pass it back to Dany to do a quick wrap-up conversation.
I know we shared quite a bit of information for y'all. If folks can reopen that survey, there's actually a part 2 and 3 to that survey that we would love to expand a little bit more on. We talked a lot about the issues. I think some of the continuing conversations that we want to hear in part 2 are, what challenges do you face in getting around your community? I think we've heard a lot from, poor ADA accessibility, lack of bike infrastructure, no sidewalks or sidewalks in poor condition. Would love to see what else folks are experiencing within their community that prevents them from getting around safely. And then the other question in part 2 is, what grade would you give your neighborhood on an ADA accessibility score, with like 1 being non-existent and 5 being amazing? So would love to see if there's any courageous speakers who maybe want to speak to some of their answers. What grade would you give your neighborhood on an ADA accessibility score? Or what challenges do you face in getting your community?
I would give this county, well, if you're looking at transportation, I'd give the transportation a 4. The transportation for that, well, no. It's limited. I stopped driving about 2 years ago. So they do have transportation for people, but it's only for doctors. I hear different stories. So I'd say I have to say, because I've gotten such inconsistent answers, maybe it's more of a 2 or 3, because it's only focused on doctors. It's not focused on taking you to like the YMCA, or if you're older and a senior center, or a church, or some things that really need to be, I mean, if you're working, I'm sure they have a different approach, because then you're bringing in some income, but I feel that they're not looking as a whole, a human, as an all-encompassing, well-rounded person. I feel that they're just promoting, this is just part of me too, but I feel like they're more promoting like pharmaceutical stuff versus, I mean, this is a dangerous area. There's questionable other things going on here, but I feel like they only will take you to a doctor, and at the same time, they only will, and I don't know how busy they are, but they only allow for 1 doctor's appointment per day. So let's just say I'm still in the county, but I figured, well, if I'm in this part of town, why don't I go see this doctor too? But they would not allow for that, at least from what I have heard. But I haven't lived in this county very long, and in all honesty, I think a bunch of crooks run the county. So, but that is my experience as far as that goes. And then, sorry, I'm just going to keep it to transportation. So that's my answer as far as transportation for this county.
Thanks,
Can I say something, please?
Go ahead, Ari.
I live in Chicago, and have born and raised here, although I lived in Lake County for over 20 years. And structurally, transportation is not one thing in the city of Chicago. And I will be honest and say I worked at the CTA Law Department. I know Dorval Carter, although he was an intern, legal intern then. He was nowhere near running the CTA. But let me give you a little history, particularly for the young woman who just came here, and God bless you. Chicago's history. I predate the Dan Ryan. That's how old I am. In fact, it was called the Dam Ryan, because when it was built politically, it went through what was then the emerging Black middle class on the South Side. That part was destroyed. That was torn down. Didn't touch Robert Taylor. No, they didn't tear that down. And going all the way to 95th Street. And so doing, it imbalanced a lot of the South Sides, Inglewood particularly, and Woodlawn. But in addition, it only went to 95th Street, and it stopped. A man Barack Obama, came to Chicago as an organizer with the Developing Communities Project. Its essential mission was to extend the 95th Street L, is what it was called then, to 130th Street, which is where the border of Chicago ends, Altgeld Gardens, before going into the south suburbs. Obama organized around that, look it up, Developing Communities Project, and said that there was money that could be allocated to do that. Well, I was at the MacArthur Foundation, and we funded a grant for that, but I just thought he was a nice big-eared guy trying to do good stuff on the South Side. However, when I became a lawyer at the CTA Law Department, they were right. And what they meaning Developing Communities Project, they had asked for a memorandum of understanding from the CTA. And people who know, and that doesn't mean you're going to sue. That means we want to understand what it is you're doing and why it is you cannot extend, this public transportation. They never answered that question. And I felt bad being in a law department saying, wow, they were right. But let me go and say now, when Obama was president, they extended money. they allocated funds or attempted to allocate funds to extend the 95th Street, the Dam Ryan L to 130th. It didn't go through then, and it wasn't that it was federal. It was that the state and, quite frankly, the CTA board, which nobody even talks about, they get appointed by the mayor, did not want to extend it because they said they had other, like they did when I was at the CTA law department, other more pressing issues where that money can be used. So, and to this day, that L stops at 95th Street. And if you live in Allgale Gardens or where I lived, 123rd and Wentworth in West Pullman, and you did not have a car that could drive you to, there was parking around the 95th Street, but if you didn't have a car from it, it could take some people almost 2 hours to get to downtown, if they're lucky, because there's one or two buses that went to 103rd, 30th, and then they had to get off on another bus to get to 95th Street. And now, quite frankly, they shouldn't extend the 95th Street L because there are no jobs downtown for those people, lower income people, less educated people, to take that trip for. Those jobs are no longer there. So I appreciate particularly what you're talking about with accessibility. Mark Briscoe, I can give you some history, I'm writing about member, who founded Access Living, one of the first disability organizations in the country. She was on President Clinton's disability commission, and supposedly her getting out of a wheelchair and crawling up to the Lincoln Memorial is the reason there is an ADA. But she threatened, while I was at the CTA law department, to sue the CTA if they did not extend those buses so that people could get on them with wheelchairs and walkers. And the CTA board did not want to do it. They said it'll cost too much money. And if we do that, we'll have to accommodate. And the Joyce Hughes, who was then a general counsel, a Black woman, said, and I was part of that department, it would cost more in terms of lawsuits to justify not creating accessible buses than it would to create accessible buses. And so Marker won, and the buses, and some of them still ain't working as well as they should, but at least they're going, they are accessible in terms of people coming. So again, the history of transportation in this city, and I haven't even begun to talk about the politics of it. The state, I mean, I know the man who tried to create the RTA, Regional Transportation Authority. You can look it up. George Rannin, an attorney who, politically between the state, and someone talked about the different counties. Lake County, I wrote on Metro for 23 years. Metro was like heaven compared to riding on some CTA buses in terms of safety, in terms of bathroom. I mean, all of the accessible things. Now, the cost, of course, was different. But again, talking about taking an L from Inglewood or which they stopped, or from the south side or the west side, compared to taking the red line from where I live in Edgewater, is like talking about being in two different countries. So I think, and I appreciate all that you're saying, but this state, this city is not one place. No, that's the state. I mean, you could talk about poorer parts of this state of Illinois, Alton. I mean, I could go to, Maywood. I mean, I can, there are places that, North Chicago and Lake County where the Metro does stop. It's not one thing. And so I think that all of what you're saying from a infrastructure lens makes sense. But you've got to get, and this is what makes it difficult, quite frankly. You need to have community information, not just us on this call, but community statistics. Where does the bus stop? Right now where I am, they're relining the buses, and some of the people, lower income people, and I live in a fairly middle class area, but some of the lower income people now have to walk further to get to the bus than they did before they started doing the restructuring. Well, that's, that's not a big thing, because once they restructure it, it'll be hopefully better. But if I went to the south side, you'd have to walk blocks, miles almost, to get a bus. And then when I get on a bus, I live in a condo building. I get on the bus, part of my building, I can be in the Magnificent Mile in 15 minutes. I don't know any bus on the south side that can do that. And all I'm saying is, I appreciate it, but we've got to, if we're going, especially if we're talking about environment, one of the biggest environmental in Illinois, and you can look her up, Irene Johnson was filing a lawsuit against Waste Management for dumping waste inside of the river, Chicago River, right in front of Argyle Gardens. And there were buses that stopped there, like I said, to take people from one little place to the other. But many of those buses would not come over that way because the smell was so bad. And so they stopped. The bus drivers themselves would no longer go and pick people up. This is some history, because it smells so bad over there. So again, all of what you're saying, I appreciate, and I think it's very important. But this is a complex place, and the complexities of it, beyond politics, the state, when you talk about inclusion, and again, my daughter just got a disability fellowship, and been trained as one of the notable Black business leaders of Chicago, and she's disabled with a disability. I love it. I mean, it's essential. But disability and racial inequity are not all the same thing. And I think you have to include racial inequity, economic inequity, in order for this to make sense. Because otherwise, any plan you do for one place may not, and usually will not, fit another place in this city, in this state. And I'm done.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that. And
so Dany and Stephanie, Ori is a retired civil rights lawyer, and she's one of our regulars, and she's a historical resource, as you can hear.
Yeah.
And there's another hand. Cordelia's raised her hand.
Let me respond to Ari first, and then we can go to Cordelia. Ari, if you wouldn't mind sharing your email with me, would love to just continue this conversation separately from this. Do want to acknowledge that what you're mentioning is a big part of our commitment. Like we mentioned at the top, we are part of the Clean Jobs Coalition, and we have been working very closely with our partners with Access Living, Active Transportation Alliance, People for Community Recovery, and a whole host of other organizations in the South and Southwest side of Chicago to continue gathering these stories and push people towards the solutions. What you're mentioning, this is very complicated and complex, and we're expecting a tough fight next year to get the funding necessary to get us to where we need to be, and also address the fact that the transit agencies aren't collaborating and haven't been collaborating. One of our closest advocates is Jackie Grimshaw, who has been doing this work as well for the last 40 years, and she's helped us understand that history. The name you mentioned, George Rand, has been part of what she's bringing to our coalition for folks who we weren't around, when RTA was first developed, but we can feel the information. We can definitely feel the inequities, and we see it in the way that the city has been structured. And I think these are some of the issues that we're looking to address and bring. And equity is definitely a big part of the conversation. I don't know if we fully hash that out here, but we are making sure we are having this conversation. So Ari, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And Cordelia?
Yes. As I mentioned before, I live in DeKalb, which is 60 miles west of Chicago. There's many reasons, though, you might want to go to Chicago, but the metro does not come out all the way here. The closest stop, I believe, is Elburn or Geneva. And so you have to take a bus if you can, if that meets the timetable, meets your needs. But it's just not that convenient. And so, years ago, I mean, there are, believe me, there are lots of train tracks that run through DeKalb, and I don't see why we couldn't have some service out here. And I think I had heard that there was years ago before my time. I'm 55, but it would be nice to have better access to Chicago. So I just wanted to add that.
It's definitely something we're looking to work with the state on. I want to acknowledge that we're a little bit over time. There is a part 3, and this is really pushing it back to y'all. What else do you want to learn about? What are you ready to take action on? I know this is an action-oriented team. So part 3 is going to ask you, of the information that we shared, of the solutions that we shared, is there something you're ready to take action on? what does action look like to you? And we're really thinking about how the state is spending money on transportation transit. So we're looking to see how the communities and how constituents are looking to spend the money. Money for the state isn't an infinite resource, so we really have to be mindful in how we're pushing the governor's office and the legislators to ensure that we are bringing the right solutions. And if there's any way that you want to be involved in this campaign, whether it's sharing your story, being present, or available to talk to your local legislator or to some of the people who are going to help impact, really we want to bring people to these conversations, and bring people to the table to lay it out for the people who are making decisions at the state. Why do we need these investments? Because like Ari was saying, this is complex. There's a lot of inequities that have been built up over the last several decades. And, I think the current generation of elected officials, we're pushing them to be better than that. And we're pushing them to really be thinking about how do we create an equitable access for the state. And it's not easy. There's still a lot of those tensions and obstacles that are facing us. But the more we can build with y'all, the more we can do this. So Stephanie, if you can move to the last slide, would love to just kind of mention that this kind of change is possible because we have had the power to make the changes. We've been able to make the movement here in the state of Illinois. We put Illinois on the map as a climate destination by passing the Climate Equitable Jobs Act, and now we're looking to build on that by addressing the transportation and a sector. And soon we're going to be addressing the building sector. So I would love for Stephanie to come back one day with some of her building sector partners to discuss some of these things on how we're going to also impact the building sector and what things need to be done in that manner. So Stephanie, I'll pass it back to you to help us close us out. Beth, do you mind typing your question in chat?
I think just since we're a little short on time, we were going to ask if you could type your question in the chat or wait till the end. Thank you. So just to wrap us up here, thank you, Dany, and thank you to everyone who shared. I fully acknowledge, as I said, I will never pretend that I have been here longer than I have. So I really appreciate hearing stories from folks who have a lot more experience than I do. Some final action steps, if you are interested. As Dany said, our ultimate goal is to push our legislators, prioritize the need for clean and equitable transportation, and across our ICJC platform. So Dany kind of alluded to this, but outside of transportation work, I work on our clean building sector. So thinking about things like ensuring that we aren't reliant on the methane gas system, so that we can ensure that we have, cleaner air in our homes. That's something that I'm working on, and that's a part of the ICJC platform that I touched on earlier. And our third section, we have transportation, buildings, and our clean, our power sector, which is so important when we think about electrifying so much of our lives, cars, buildings, et cetera. We want to do that off of clean power. So if you're interested, you can use your phone and scan this QR code to send an automated letter to your legislator asking them to support the entire ICJC platform. As in addition, that was the last one. I forgot because Dany already mentioned at the beginning here, or at the end of that last section, that another way to be engaged is, to kind of keep, you are such an action-oriented team, and we really appreciate your, letting us be here tonight. So here are our emails if you want to connect, and we're happy to answer any other questions, or I'm happy to come back to chat on clean buildings another time. So thank you so much for having us.
So that's good. I definitely think we need to have you on again. What's the link between Inflation Reduction Act money and the Illinois Clean Jobs, CEJA? What money is available? There's a lot of money available for retrofits for houses and all that stuff. And I've been talking about that.
Oh, yeah.
I want to get an induction stove. And so I'm working on that part of it. But anyway, so we should probably we should have you guys on again sometime in the near future. Is there legislation coming up in Illinois that we need to act on? Probably nothing right now, but I would just ask that please keep the folks posted as to what action needs to be taken. And for those of you outside the state of Illinois, in Illinois, we have something called witness slips. So it's like being able to lobby on legislation in Illinois. You can sign a witness slip, and you don't have to be there and lobby. I would recommend other states have that too, so you could actually say something to your legislatures and participate. So is there anything else we want to try to answer here?
We're happy to be available via email too, but I think that's all on our end.
All we've got. So okay, well we'll end it here, but thank you so much for coming on. I look forward to talking with you both again. I think we should repeat this down the road, maybe probably in the new year, but it's great to know that you're working on this, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of progress we get. So anyway, thanks everybody for coming on. Please keep in touch. Thanks to all of you, and thanks to Dany and Stephanie for coming on, and we'll be in touch.